Welcome to the Mindful Paths podcast with Nick Day and Harry Kalimnios, where we explore the fascinating world of mindset, mindfulness, fitness, well-being, vitality, leadership, and of course, personal development.
Our goal is to provide you with insights to help you live a more fulfilling, happier, and healthier life.
So if you're striving to be a better parent, friend, leader, colleague, or boss, or if you simply want to be more mindful and aware of the world around you, then this Mindful Paths podcast is going to be for you.
We invite you to eavesdrop on our conversations, and we challenge you to discover a new insight to help you on your own journey towards personal growth and positive change.
So sit back,
relax, and let's begin our journey together
on the Mindful Paths podcast. Harry, it's the new year. Welcome everyone back to the first recording we're doing in the new year. I know we've already released one episode in the new year, but we recorded that pre-Christmas. So the date today is the 12th of January. And I'm opening up with the introduction today because it's been an interesting Christmas period, particularly for Harry. For those that are close to him, I already know, but for those that are regular listeners that aren't aware, we've talked a lot on this show about my dad and him being in palliative care and battling cancer and the preparations it takes to try and accept the inevitable that at some point I'm going to lose my dad. And Harry's been integral to supporting me on that journey and helping me with coping mechanisms and bits and pieces. But very sadly and unexpectedly, on Christmas Eve, Harry actually lost his father, which caught Harry by surprise, caught everybody by surprise. There's us on this show for the last, best part of a year talking about the situation that I've been in with my family. And it just goes to show that actually sometimes things happen that we just don't expect. And we decided to record this show where Harry is, of course, still very vulnerable, still processing the news, to keep it real, to bring everyone into the conversation that me and Harry would be having as if we were friends, catching up and talking about it and processing it directly. So making a slightly different introduction today, just to bring you all into a little bit of context. But obviously, I'm delighted to see my friend today. I'm delighted to catch up with you, Harry. So Happy New Year, sir, for whatever that might mean in whatever context that you may take that in this moment. And look, really, really good to see you.
Yeah, and it's really nice to chat and connect. And as you said to everyone, so my dad unexpectedly passed away on Christmas Eve, and to kind of set the scene. I was actually in Brighton. I'd gone on a couple of days earlier to Brighton, and I was actually in the house doing. This was around 9 a.m, so I was just finishing up a yoga session at home and feeling kind of blissed out. And I had my phone on. Normally my phone's off or it's on silent because I don't have internet there. So I was streaming the YouTube video from my phone, but I didn't hear, there was no interruption or anything like that to the signal. But my sister was calling me. And then finally I spotted it at 9:20 and she was like, there's an emergency with dad, and then a few minutes later, my mum managed to call. To be honest, the hardest thing for me right now, even talking about it, is hearing my mum's voice at the end of the phone in that kind of panic state, because she was there. The paramedics by then had arrived, but I think it took them maybe 25, 30 minutes to get there from the call. My mum had been doing CPR. So my dad had just come out the shower, walked back to the room and was like, I'm out of breath and everything. And then they were literally getting ready to drive down to Brighton. Hearing my mum's voice and being, miles away, which, unfortunately as well, the irony as well is that when my dad, as some regular listeners know, back in April, I think it was, went into hospital because he had like low blood oxygen at the time. I was in Brighton again there. And so it's like, and I'm not in Brighton very often, but it's just, you can do all you can do. And then the one time that you're away, you things happen. So you can't kind of always live to always be there because you just don't know what's going to happen. But anyway, so at the time, the paramedics were working, I was at my house. So I rushed around to my other sister's house because my car was there. And by the time I picked up the car, my sister had told me that our other sister, who had arrived on the scene, said that he hadn't made it. So actually, obviously, it was massive bombshell and shock. But I do distinctly remember, we talk about breathing all the time. But one of the things I did as soon as I heard 10:30, was take all these breaths, like really, because I was in a hugely stressful state, and I knew that I was going to be driving up to London in a few minutes, and so I was doing some of the practices like the breathing stuff. Had the tears, had the emotion, settled down after a few minutes, and then drove up to London in about 90 minutes, and then was with my mum until the coroner, not the coroner, but the funeral people came and then took the body away. And I did go in and see my dad. It's really weird. I mean, I don't know if any listeners or yourself have ever seen a dead body. I remember with my gran when she passed away in 2010, and we went there at like 3 a.m. to the hospital with my mum. For me, when I see the body, I don't see the person, because the essence is gone, and to me, it was really weird. I mean, my friends, I spoke to a couple of friends on the day, and one whose mother-in-law and father-in-law passed away not that long ago, and he was like, look, maybe you should go and see the body. And so I did go up there, but we had like 5-10 minutes each, like me, my sister, my mum, to sort of say goodbye. But for me, the body is the body. And I remember, like, when I did my ayahuasca, I think we talked about it. One of the things I felt in one of the sessions was this idea that this body is just the vehicle. It's like, the soul is so much more. And so when the soul has kind of departed the body, my dad is the stuff around that, not the physical body, which actually brings me some comfort. It might sound weird to other people, but my sister's asking me if I want to see the body before it goes in, like, for the funeral stuff. But I don't think I do, because it's not for me to say goodbye to that body. It's like that. My dad is around. Yeah, my dad's around in everything I do. When I prep my food, when I do think it's really weird. So
the spirit, it's the spirit in the as you say, the aura or whatever. But it's interesting.
It's really weird.
I haven't seen a body. I've had the opportunity to. My grandparents passed away many years ago. And actually, my mum saw my grandpa. My mum was very, very close to my dad's dad. And she said that she said you always remember the last time. She always had the image of the last time she saw my grandpa. Yeah. She doesn't want me to have that image. She wants me to remember the one, the body with life, not the body without. And it'd be interesting, because I'm probably going to have this same quandary as to whether I see my dad when that time comes or whether I don't. And I think I don't want to, because of what my mum said, but whether I do or not on the moment, it's really hard to predict how I'll feel at that time.
Yeah, it is hard. And you do. I mean, I remember my grand's that image and my dad's image, but there are some, scrambling techniques within NLP that I've used, actually, because you kind of make the image a bit darker, a bit fuzzier and things like that. And actually they do work, and it takes the charge off it. So even though I can see the image, I haven't forgotten the image, but the charge is not there. The charge in my emotions is not there. And we've been looking at lots of photos recently of my dad, because we're collating like over 1,000 photos to show at the funeral or the thing at the house afterwards. And that's kind of how you're remembering him, right? Not like there. I mean, he was looking, my mum was like, she was in tears, but it's like, oh, he just looks like he's sleeping, like he's going to wake up. The one saving grace, I mean, like, in that moment, and I think I put about it in my post, is that, because they were getting ready to go to Brighton, my mum could have been in the car, or she could have been like packing the car, but she was actually in the bedroom. So she was with him.
Which is lovely.
She was with him, and he knew that she was trying to save his life, and holding her hand and holding his hand and giving the CPR and doing all of that. So I think, other than maybe dying in your sleep overnight with your family downstairs, like, that's probably one of the better ways to go, right? Your wife for 52 years fighting to save your life, and in your own home, in your own bedroom. Because part of me is like, okay, let's say that he'd been revived and then he goes into hospital, and then hospitals generally are not places that I would choose for people to go and recover a lot of the time, because they tend not to. Like, my gran died in hospital and a few other things, and she was fine up until she started going into hospital. But it's better, I think, that he passed in his own home with his wife.
I agree.
So.
I think interestingly, so bringing my dad's situation into context for the moment. So there's a celebration today as well, which I almost feel awkward ringing up, right? But it's my parents' 50th wedding anniversary today. We're celebrating it tomorrow. And I know that this is something that all of our family were desperately hoping my dad would be okay for. And he's, touch wood. And we were celebrating tomorrow. He's still with us tomorrow. Then he's going to be there in person to be part of that celebration, celebrate 50 years of marriage with my mum. And, but, he's had to, I'm bringing it into context what you just mentioned. He's had to let us know a few things about some of the decisions he's made. And one of those is not to be resuscitated. And it's interesting because, as you say, a lot of people, when you die, it's often heart failure. We were talking off air earlier, whether, that's just what ultimately goes. It doesn't mean that's actually what it was. Yeah. It's just that's the fails that causes the death. But he was saying, look, I'm choosing not to be resuscitated because it's not like in the movies. It's like they will come in. I have a weak body. It's it could break ribs. It could be very painful, and I may never recover. I may have brain damage, all these different things. But he's like, I'm just letting you know that that's something that I've selected. But also, I feel very grateful, thankful, whatever the word might be, that I've had the opportunity to, I guess, prepare myself as best as anyone can prepare themselves for these kind of things, right? While I'm devastated that my dad has this terminal illness, it's given us an opportunity to do things like you mentioned before, to go with those 50 questions, to enjoy time, to try and see as much of him as I possibly can while I still can. But it's interesting you mentioned earlier that you said that you've been fine for most of the time. I say fine in inverted commas, right? But until you kind of speak to your mum and then the emotions come out, right? So I've got to do a speech for my parents. Obviously, by the time this goes out live, I hopefully would have delivered it. And I wrote it yesterday. Fine. I've written it into a poem. I've made a poem that kind of coincides with the vows that they would have made 50 years ago. So, for example, and it's a 30-verse poem, but things like, in times of ritual poor, they found the way. After all, wealth isn't financial, it's family and play. And I'll just sort of go on with a little bit of thing and using the lines of the thing to bring it up. And I wrote it pretty fine. I was pretty happy with how it finished. And I thought, you know what, I'll read it to Lucy, my wife, yesterday to see what she thinks. Check it's happy, check it's not too long, and it kind of works. And then within the poem, there are certain bits where I actually quote my dad, and there's certain bits which bring back difficult memories. So my parents have been through a stillborn. They've had a couple of miscarriages. Like anyone in 50 years, you're met with challenges that test you, right? So that's in the poem. But I've also mentioned some of the fun times we've had, family holidays in Turkey, France, living in tents, having no money growing up and hand-me-down clothes and things like that. And there's a couple of times where I impersonate my dad. Anyway, I thought it was all quite fun. I said, now, Lucy, coming through. I was in a really good space. Let me read this to you. Let me check if it's on the right tone. Within 3 lines, I was in floods of tears. And it's funny, I had no idea it would come through until I read it to Lucy. Wow. And then, who obviously is very close, my wife is someone I love dearly. And then it was talking about something really personal to me. And yet I'd been writing this for a couple of hours and hadn't shown any emotion at all in the writing. It was more in the creative spirit. But the second I started reading it out loud, and this is a good example of how coaching makes a difference. We can think things in our head and not get emotional, but the second we say things out loud, or we're with someone that we trust and we love, emotions can just be turned immediately on like a waterfall. Right? And I struggled to get through it. I'm really delighted that I managed to do it, because I'm hoping now, with practice, by the time the day comes, which is only tomorrow, those same emotions won't perhaps come up as strong. But maybe I will if they're in presence.
I mean, that's got me thinking, because I'm going to say some words next week at the funeral. So I think all 3 of us we're going to say different bits. And I was like saying, well, I'm not going to write the speech, because I tell people, don't write a speech, right? Just write the plan. And so I just got notes of things I want to cover, like, him building my bikes when we were kids, and, building my basketball thing, and, trying to do exercise with me in his 70s, all of that. But now I'm like thinking, because I will probably be in floods as well, maybe I should have something more written down so I can pull back to it. So I might readdress how I do that. So I've got normally what I would do as well, and this might work for you if you have it on a paper. I don't know if you're going to do that, but I always never print it size 12. Always print it size like 16 or something like bigger, and then have some keywords like size 24, so that you can be drawn to it really quickly when you're got tears in your eyes or things like that. Is what I would.
That's good advice. I might shift it up. I'm probably going to print it and give it to them as a bit of a gift as well. But there's a section in there. I've put a thing about dad continues to fight bravely against prostate cancer's embrace. And I would just say, fuck cancer, I say, it can never erase. The love mum and dad have in sickness and in health makes me appreciate this. In giving to others, we truly find wealth. So I'm trying to, those things that when you talk about cancer and stuff in the show, I know it's going to make me emotional. But it was funny. You said when you see your mum. It's when you see your mum. It's when we
well, also because she's been staying with me a lot, and so every time, so I let a lot of people know, like I let you know as well via text, right? And obviously older generations, she's been calling everyone,
sure,
in Greece, and so she's been with me, and so every time I'm hearing her in Greek talk about it to people, or even in English talk about it to people. She's like in the other room, gone away, but I can hear it. And then that brings me very emotional as well. And so it's really hard but it's part of the process, right? As well, all of these things are. And, I'm not sure what the stages of grief are. Some say there's 5, 7, whatever, but certainly shock and denial is there. And I think we're probably still in all that shock stage and also that action stage where it's about getting things done, which is fine, which is good. It needs to happen, like death certificate we did the other day, and organizing the funeral stuff, getting some all of the practical stuff, and then there'll be time for even more of the emotional stuff. There's been emotional stuff up to now, of course, but I mean, so one of the things that obviously it happened on Christmas Eve, which was really rubbish. But so I came up, picked up my mum, and we drove down to my other sisters in Brighton for about 5 or 6 p.m. Christmas Eve, and they were there with my sister's mother-in-law, who's also she was only given not even one Christmas to live, 3 Christmases ago, so she's made it 3
amazing
beyond. I think she's got leukemia or something. Now she's gone downhill a lot, I think, in the last week. So now my brother-in-law might have to drive down to Devon or Cornwall to sort that out. And it's all happening at once with our family, unfortunately. But what was really nice was that even on Christmas Eve, I think, and I think the listeners know that for about maybe coming up to 5 years now, my mum, my sister and I have been doing this daily gratitude practice where we write things in our WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Even on that day, she wrote in her gratitude list. We all did. And we haven't missed a day. We haven't missed a day since. And it's these little things, right? The breathing, the gratitude. I mean, none of this is going to make it good or better or bring him back. But I mean, having the self-care practices, those sorts of things, it just gives you a little bit more of a buffer.
I agree.
And I feel that it is helping in some way. I mean, obviously, I think that where it's really going to hit for me will be in the months and years to come when you suddenly, because I often rely on my dad for DIY type stuff, right? He was always with that. So when there's issues with the house and things like that, I'm like, oh, but what would that,
and let's be clear, he's very, very good at DIY. I met your dad. I'm very fortunate. I feel very, very fortunate that I met him. I met him before, but I met him recently, and I hadn't seen your dad for years. And I went to your place, only a few months ago, and had the wonderful opportunity to see your dad again. And we had a really good chat about the amazing barbecue center he'd made, his own design, in your house, and he built your basketball rings. And did all sorts. He was an engineer, wasn't he? I think engineer by trade.
He was an engineer. He had a PhD. He was a leading expert when he was working in plastic optical fibres, like fibre optics. Got invited around the world to lecture and things like that. And speaking of your parents' 50th wedding anniversary, so my parents have been married over 52 years. We didn't actually celebrate their 50th really, which was, because during then, I guess it was 2021. There was still, I don't know if there was still restrictions, but then my dad also was in a tired kind of sort of state, and so wasn't really up for things. And I felt that was a real shame because they never really celebrated. I think they did the 25th, but
I think it's become a bigger thing in our family because my dad's made it, right? So it's been giving him something to look forward to, something to aim towards, and it's the hope often when you're unwell is what keeps you going, right? And having something to aim for and to holding on, whatever. I thought a couple of quotes that my wife says a lot, so I'll credit her with both of them, although I'm sure she didn't come up with either. The when you're talking about your dad and processing, and there are two that come to mind, and something that they're very present in my mind for when that time comes as well, and not just with my dad, with anybody. I'm gonna lose my dog at some point, which may sound I don't know, insensitive in the scheme of losing a parent, but we've had our dog for 16 years, and he's a part of our life. And when you're 16, he's not going to go on for too much longer. But my wife will always say it's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all. And grief is the price we pay for love. And I'm sure that's in a song somewhere. But if it's important that the opportunity to grieve means you've had the opportunity to love, and
that's it. And
celebrate that love is
both my mum, she's like, we had like very happy life together. No one ever cheated on anyone. Like they never argued, except for they had like normal marital disagreements about things. But they never fought or anything like that. She met him when she was 19. They got married by the time she was 20. He was 27 when they got married. So
that's similar to my parents. 17, like 7-year gap as well. My mum was married at 17.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So I mean, unless I live to 200, that'll probably not happen for me to be married for 52 years. But we'll never know. I mean, so
the way you live your life, you could definitely live to 100. Let's be fair. So anything's possible, Harry.
It could be possible.
You've optimized everything, right? That's definitely
hopefully. I know. I was looking at some photos.
But your wife kills you off beforehand, which is also a distinct possibility with the way you live your life.
There's a photo of my 33rd birthday, and this was in 2010. It would have been, and would it have been 2010? Yeah, 2010. But I think I look worse than I do now. Like my color was not kind of there in the skin. I looked older than I probably do now. My sister was saying, "Yeah, I think you're aging backwards," because we're looking at. But then
Benjamin Button, isn't it? That's what my dad. Yeah, it might be a true story.
The thing is, the big thing is that kids age you, right? You can't. If you have kids, you age quicker. I mean, that's.
What are you saying? You're saying, easy, Harry. Come on, let's not get aggressive. Come on. What are you saying? I've got 2 kids. You say on a goal.
Constant stress.
Moisturise. You've got to moisturise.
So if I ever have kids, I'm sure I'll age rapidly. But actually, one of the quotes that we've made these little cards, which is not really traditional in Greek culture to do, but they're more in Catholic culture. But we did it for my gran, and my mum wanted it. So we've got these cards with some pictures of my dad on and some quotes. But one of the quotes that we've got here, I think it's from Helen Keller, but we quite liked it. We put it on is, "What we have once enjoyed, we can never lose. All that we love deeply becomes a part of us." And I really resonated with that because, like I said, he lives on in like not just your genetics and DNA, but like I say, like how I arrange my utensils when I'm cooking food, or how I chop the food, or what I think about in terms of things I do. And obviously, we had our differences in terms of a lot of how we lived our lives. Like my dad never really exercised hugely until kind of lockdown when we started doing stuff together, but he was always willing to try out my crazy contraptions, like those compression trousers that I bought for him, and the electrical stimulation on the feet to give him a bit of a boost up, and rebounder. I bought him a rebounder so he would get on a trampoline, and we would do resistance training. And this is in his late 70s, so fair play to him. So he was always good. Life and soul of the party. Now we're actually collating, and this might be another thing which might be quite interesting for you to think about in the future. But so when I put the posts on Instagram and Facebook, and then text messages that are coming through, all the comments that people who have met him, some people just met him like once 25 years ago, and they're like, yeah, he was so welcoming, he invited us into his house and gave us loads of food and all of that. And so we're just collating that to put that into a little book so that people can sort of see that. And it's just like the way that a person touches your life is, because right now, most of the time, we're not physically seeing people, right? We haven't physically seen each other probably since September. A lot of the interactions you have with people are via text message or posts on Instagram, whatever, which is a real shame. But the point I'm trying to make with that is that the essence of that person extends way beyond the physical 3 dimensions of that person. So in that respect, I feel like his sense will be with us forever, as it has been with my gran, who had a massive influence on our family. So we try to take the positives from things, and what we talk about. I say nothing has any meaning except for the meaning you give it, and this is one of the hardest circumstances where you choose to find the meaning that you want. Right? I'm very grateful that, I lived 7 minutes away from my dad for the last 3 years. And, other than when I was traveling, we saw each other all the time. We had a good relationship. Other friends who've got in touch with me are like, that tribute that you made was really touching. And it made me think about my own relationship because I don't have a relationship with my dad. And so there's so many things to be thankful for. And yes, we didn't really have time to prepare, but in a way, one of my favorite philosophies, as you may know, is Stoicism. And one of the Stoic philosophies is to kind of visualize the bad. Like a lot of time we talk about visualizing all your wonderful life. But for the last 5 or 6 years, I have been visualizing and preparing for this moment as much as anyone can do in their imagination.
Listen, that's exactly where I've been, right? I did a run this morning. I ran, to music. Sometimes I listen to podcasts, sometimes I run to other things. And today was just a music day because I was in a run of visualizations and preparations for the celebrations to come, to think about my dad, to think about what might happen when that time comes. I hope it doesn't come soon, but there's a worry now that because he's made it to this date, we've got to find the next goal, find the next thing to make him hold on a bit longer. So there's a nervousness that once we've got through tomorrow, has he got to the bit he's been aiming for? He's very, very sick. I mean, there's no doubt he's so
when he's in palliative care, does that mean he's not in the house? Does he mean?
No, he's at home. He's at home, but he's got a nurse that will come and look after him. He listens to the show, so I've got to be slightly careful about how I put it because I want to stay, as you say, always on the optimistic side of things, right? But he's lost a lot of weight. His mobility now is very limited. He's eating almost nothing, right? I'm giving him protein shakes and things to try and get it in, but he doesn't want anything food-wise. No. And he's been very, very sick. So it's been difficult. There's certain things we can't do now because he's not strong enough to do the treatments, not strong enough to do certain things. So it's not great. I always live in a place of hope that something else would come in and maybe something will shift. But at the same time, we've all got to be realistic that he has terminal cancer that they gave him initially 3 months, 3 years ago, a bit like your mother-in-law, right? And he's still holding on. So he's defied science, he's defied the doctors. But the cancer's not getting any smaller, it's getting bigger. It's everywhere. He's got a lot of pain. He's had a hip replacement. He's eating through the bones. He's got femur problems now. I think it's probably eating through his femur. It wasn't an accident. It just broke because the cancer ate it away. So he's not in great shape, and he's in a lot of discomfort, and that's difficult. When you come and see your dad, and he's in a lot of pain. He's no appetite. It's been very difficult. We've had to line up the idea of tomorrow, so I don't know if he can actually make the celebration yet. We've got two options. One is he can cope. I'm hoping.
Where are you doing it? At the house or?
No. It's at their favourite location. It's a place called the Red Lion in Salisbury, where all family events seem to have happened since I've been growing up. But if not, we're going to set him up with a laptop link, and he'll check in. We've got a big party, 40, 50 odd people coming, but he may have to link through laptop and sort of say hi. There's no way he'll make the whole party whether we can get him there or not. It's a bit of a, ordeal's the wrong word. It needs some planning to get him there in the first place and things like that. So I was running this morning with that concern, emotional concern that, once we've got through tomorrow, we've got to find a goal to keep him going and keep pushing.
I mean, he's just had some more grandchildren, right? Arrive.
Two new grandchildren, which is amazing.
You do need a goal because that's the thing. My dad didn't really have the last engineering goal I gave him was that beam that I've got in my gym. They spent months researching the right word, and actually he was coming alive with that. And then he got excited designing my sister's different ideas for my sister's house in Brighton and stuff. And then obviously baby Phoenix arrived in August. There was these little things. But one of the things we talk about in my beat model, right, is purpose, right? You need purpose. And so, you've got to find that next thing for him to hang on to. I think that's same with my brother-in-law's mum is that, there was she was hanging on to meet the new grandchild. She was hanging on to see the new house. And then now I'm not sure there is that thing, and she got an infection and she was on antibiotics, and I think she has weekly blood transfusions. So
my dad had a 7-hour transfusion last week. He was there for 7 hours. It's pretty long trying to help things through.
It's hard because you're so they're in Salisbury, are they?
They're in Salisbury, yeah.
How far is that from you?
About 2 hours, just over.
Okay,
but I've been down there a lot. Tried to see him as much as possibly can, driving back and forth, just to nip in. And it's funny. I say it's funny. So me and my sister, or my sisters and my brother, we'll go and see him, and he's always looks like, he's really struggling, and well, he'll say looks, he is really, really struggling. But if I bring my wife, Lucy sees him, or my brother-in-law Biffy goes and sees him, he's always in really top form. And it's like they're almost like, he doesn't ever seem as bad as you say he is. I'm like, I promise you, when I see him, this is not how he is. But when he sees you guys, it's almost like you perk him up, or you find this inner energy, this inner place of just being, I feel a bit better today. Lucy's here. And it's like, oh, so it's really not, you kind of makes you feel there's inner strength in there. You've got a positive mindset. I might probably drive him mad. Every time I see him, I said, look, Dad, let's not talk about the pain you're in that we can't take away. Let's talk about what we can do. We've got, what have you enjoyed seeing today? You've got your eyes. Have you seen your grandchildren? What have you enjoyed doing? It's difficult. It's difficult.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard when trying
to get him to see the positive.
You're at the end. I mean, I guess one of the benefits, I suppose, of knowing you're heading towards the end is that you can put those arrangements in place. Because the big thing is, like, when it's a sudden, unexpected death, you're like, what do we do? Like, so we had a big palaver with, grave sites and this and the other. Then, like, now it's, bills and finances and, all of those things that, like, my dad would take care of. Like, my mum, she doesn't cook and she doesn't drive on the motorway, which is a big problem, those two things. She's only filled up the car with petrol twice in 50 years or something like that. So, like, things like that she has to, like, learn, which, humans are adaptable and stuff. But it restricts her in terms of getting to Brighton. But yeah, then there's all the other stuff to deal with, like the finances, the admin, all of that, which and it got me thinking about, like, my own passing, is that I'm not sure. There just needs to be a way that there's a number that you call, and then that's taking, like, and everything, all your wishes, like, they go, I want this play track at my funeral. I want to be cremated on this. I want to be, these are the accounts that I've got, and these are the passwords or whatever, like, just everything sorted. So you call one thing, and then the family, I mean, in a way, it gives you something to do, which is also really important, because you need to be a bit distracted. I mean, I've been at work this week, 2 days, and I didn't share it with the kids, but often I'm talking about things where then he'll jump into my mind. Like, I'll say, oh, nothing means anything except the meaning you give it. Or when you're in a really stressful situation, breathe. And I'm like, I had a really stressful situation the other day, and I was breathing, and that helped me. And then I'm not talking about the thing, but it's coming into my head, and then I'm starting to kind of, like, well up a little bit. And so, yeah, it's just, it would be nice if there was just, like, that one thing where it's like, so you don't have to take care of anything, because now we've got to like think about all that, like selling the house.
I thought I had an ingenious idea, right? So I went and saw my parents recently, and obviously for the same reasons, just preparing it, make sure mum knows how to do everything. When that time comes. And I said, I thought, because Dad's not really someone to write, he's a farmer by trade, right? He's not someone who's sat down writing lists and doing stuff. It's just, you ask him how to do something, you just do it. Well, how do you sort out this, that, and the other, Dad? How do you? He's like, well, I don't know. You just do it. It's easy. And I'm like, okay, but we don't know, so we need to know. But you're not going to write it down. So I said, well, I've got a great idea. I came down with a recorder, and I said, look, you tell me how it's done. I'll just press record. And then you haven't got to write anything down. We've got a record here where everything's done in audio, and we'll just follow those instructions. I thought that solves all the problems, right? Because we're trying to get these things done. Anyway, suggested this in the presence of a mum and dad, and mum went, nope, absolutely not. There is no way I'm listening to his voice. I could handle it. I can't do it. I just will never listen to it. She said, when he's gone, all pictures are coming down. I won't be able to look at his pit face or hear his voice for a long time until I'm ready. Now, that's her way of preparing for what's to come. But I was like, oh, there's me thinking it was a good idea without really thinking about the...
Get it transcribed, get it recorded, and then get it transcribed.
Transcribe it, yeah.
But my mum, I mean, when we came back from Brighton, like, this put tears in her eye. Like, basically, his last everything that he had written down, because he had written down a plan of food for Christmas Eve and Boxing Day.
He was a great cook as well, right?
He was a great cook. So he wasn't doing Christmas Day, but he was going to do Christmas Eve and Boxing Day. So he was telling my mum what to get. He had the list, he had the timings, he had the portions. So we still got that piece of paper, because my mum obviously naturally didn't want to throw it away. So we're going to put that as part of the pack and the book and stuff. But it's hard. Like, my mum is the opposite. I think we have so many photos around our house, which you may remember from coming to that house, and so many albums, and we're sifting through all the photos now. And actually, we watched a bit of the questions that we did. So I did with my dad. We recorded the video, and I've got it on my Vimeo account, and we watched a bit of that. recently because we were trying to think of like a quote or a saying that he had said to put on the card, but I could only watch bits of it. I haven't watched all of it. But that was, that was hard, but it was nice to do. I think what I'll do at some point is, we'll put it on the big screen with like me, my sisters, and my mum, and watch all of it, and have a good cry and everything. But I do recommend, and I know you've done it with your dad, and I recommend to the listeners. And I sent the questions out to maybe 10, 15 friends recently. I said, I'm so glad I did this. I'm so glad.
Yeah,
I did.
Me too. Me too. Yeah, and for sure. I mean, it links to a nice question actually that I'll have for you, which again I think it's something the listeners are worth bearing in mind. Right? There's it's not a parable, but it's something to think about. Which is if you're on your deathbed now, what are the ghosts that would come and visit you of the things you haven't done, the people you haven't called, the things that matter? So it's worth putting into context. If you suddenly got a debilitating, life-threatening illness and you suddenly found yourself on a deathbed. What ghost would come and visit you right now if you're listening to this, whether you're aged 18, 35, 85, it doesn't matter, of the regrets or the things you haven't done. Now, I'm not a big believer in regrets anyway, but it's worth having that thought process. And I think from my perspective, my dad's already told me there's nothing. He said, I'm proud of my family. I've done everything I wanted to do. He said, I don't want to write a book, none of that stuff. He said, I don't get visited by any ghosts. So that gives us all some comfort.
Yeah.
Then I said to him, okay, well then taking that a level further, then there's something called the 5 biggest regrets of the dying. And I'll read these out. You may know them, but the one particular one is, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. My dad went, no, I'm not worried about that. I've worked what I needed to do, and that's fine. I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. Yeah. Well, my dad's definitely living a life true to himself. Yeah. He's old school in that way, so that's pretty easy. I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. Certainly, my dad's been more emotional in the last 20 years of my life than he was the first 20 years. And maybe that's a transition going from working on a farm to other things, but I don't think that's a concern. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. I mean, his best friend is my mum, and he's got a close-knit group, which are all at the party we had in France, which we talked about on the show, and they're going to be there tomorrow. And I wish I'd let myself be happier. And I think the one thing my dad will say is he's not ready to go because he's absolutely loved every moment on this earth. And that gives me comfort as his son. But the 5 biggest regrets of dying, and what I would say is, if you're listening to this and any of those 5 points resonate with you, if any of these things are regrets that you think you might have, like wishing you hadn't worked so hard, like wishing you stayed in touch with your friends, then you don't know what's around the corner. Yeah. Take the opportunity to remove those from the list and let yourself be happier. Do stay in touch with those that are important to you. Do have the courage to express your feelings. Don't suppress grief. Don't suppress anger. Don't suppress any of those things. Let it out. And then you can live an authentic life. And I think those things are worth thinking about, because I know from even meeting your dad only a couple of times, I would be surprised if there are many ghosts that visited him.
No, I was going to say, I know for sure there wouldn't be, because one, he even like not that long ago, he said, oh, look, because the last 6 months I've kind of stepped back a little bit of trying to get him to change things. I thought, you know what, he's got however long he's got left, let's not try and get him to quit this and do this and whatever. And he goes, no, if I go today, I'm happy, right? I enjoy my life. And those 5 questions, again, he would have no regrets. Like the work, like even the working, like for example, I remember when he came back to the UK, that we were living in Greece when I was a baby, and came back and he started working in Basildon. But my mum was like, you're not going to see the kids like working in that. So he actually went from industry, where he could have earned way more money, into academia, so that he could have like the long holidays and time and do all that. So everything was about his family, and yes, he had a successful academic career in international lecture and things like that. But it was always around the family. So everything like my parents made as decisions was about the family. So that wouldn't be an issue. He was always very happy. Can't remember all those other questions, but when you were reading them out, like, he would have none of those regrets at all. Like, he was quite expressive. He was very jovial. Everyone comments like he was warm. No one has a bad word to say about him. So I think he would be very happy, and he was happy with his life. He had no regrets. Came to the UK at 18. By the way, he didn't actually know how to cook. He for the first 6 months he was here, he would go to King's Cross and go to like this fry-up place and just eat fry-ups all the time. And he was living with his sister, who's maybe like, I think 6 or 8 years older, and she passed away last year. But she had 2 children who were like maybe like young kids. But the way that he learned to cook, and he would tell me, is that his sister was very sly, and so she would put something on that she was cooking, and she'd go, "I'm just going to go to the post office, right? So when I'm gone, can you just add a little bit of salt this, stir this, do that?" And she did that progressively over time to the point where he surpassed her as a cook. And like,
what a great story.
Everyone comments on his cooking, and that's how he learned how to cook. And then cooking became his relaxation. So we always used to wait for him to come home from work. So we always used to eat very late, because although he was working in academia, by the time he finished, we finished school at like 3 o'clock. So by the time he finishes, it's like sort of 6 o'clock because he's lecturing, then he gets back at 7. And by the time he cooked, and he used to take his time with cooking, it'd be like 8:30 is when we used to eat.
We had dinner at 9:15 last night, mate. I know it's bad, isn't it? Spoke to my sister. She said she's in bed at 9 o'clock. I was like, oh my God, we haven't even had dinner.
Well, I went round to my folks, as you know, yesterday with my sister, and I cooked for my sister, and my mum had a tiny bit. She's not really eating much. But I think that was probably about 8:30 as well. So it was quite late for me. But interestingly, my aura says my stats were good because it was all good food. So my heart rate was quite low. But so he became a great cook because of my aunt kind of subterfuge and stuff. So
maybe I'll try the same trick. I'm a bit worried though that I end up with a burnt down house. I'll say to Eva, okay, right, we're doing some pasta. It's boiling on the thing. I'll be back in 10. I
mean, I like that. I mean, Eva's 13, right? I was cooking at 12. 14. Well, I was cooking at 12. I remember cooking my own stuff at about 12, and also because I was in the Scouts anyway, so we did a lot of cooking. So by the time you're 15, you're a patrol leader, so you're in charge of everyone else anyway. So I remember cooking through the Scouts, but also with my dad. And so I would sometimes cook different things, like just simple things like grilled chicken or something like that and whatever. But I remember from 12 years old doing food. So it's never too, I don't think it's too early. Like even with my nieces, I'm getting them to like make the smoothies and learn how to chop with a knife under supervision and things like that. And it takes a longer in a way, because you think, oh, if I just folded the laundry, if I just chopped this, it would get quicker. But, over like 5 or 6 years of getting them to do it, then suddenly you've got a helper, so it's kind of worth the pain for long-term gain.
Well, a bit of prep for today, and only because we mentioned it in the last episode as well about a book that I really enjoyed, and actually I gave it to my mum for Christmas, a book called Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender by David Hawkins. There is a section here on grief, and that's not why the book resonated with me, but I had a reread of it coming into today, and I thought it might be, will it be something that might be worth just bringing to the fore. Obviously it's a big chapter, but a couple of bits I looked out. It says grief is time limited. The fact gives us the courage and willingness to face grief. If we don't resist the feeling of grief and actually totally surrender to it, it'll run out in about 10 to 20 minutes. Then it will stop for variable lengths of time. If we keep surrendering to it every time it comes up, it will eventually run out. We just have to allow ourselves to experience it fully. We only have to tolerate an overwhelming grief for 10 to 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden it will disappear. However, if we resist the grief, then it will go on and on. Suppressed grief can go on for years. I thought I'd just ask you how it's been something emotion I've never really experienced. And, we're trying to lean into everything when it comes to mindfulness and be, raise our awareness of everything. Is that how it's been experienced for you so far? Has it come in those big waves of 10, 20 minutes that you're able to kind of collect your thoughts and then it comes back again? Or are you letting grief in?
I don't think it's even been that long, and this is why I think on some level I'm not dealing with it, and that's why
still processing.
I think at the moment I'm still in a shock stage, because yes, I've had tears and welling up and emotions, and even like earlier today and whatever, but it's not lasted that long, and it's not like my mum has had that with the conversations that she's having, which I think is better, because I don't think she dealt with the grief of losing her mum. She didn't deal with the grief of losing her dad. She lost her dad when she was, I think, in Greece. So she would have been about I'm in that proper grief stage. I mean, I'm in that shock, and also not denial, but almost like I'm in an adventure. Like even when I heard the news, and this sounds bad to say, I was like, oh, right, okay, this is like being in a movie, right? And I'm like, there's shit happening and I need to deal with it, and whatever else. And so I'm not sure I've properly dealt with it, and I want to because I tend to have a habit of like not dealing with sometimes emotions that need to be dealt with. So I think once I go through the funeral and a few other things, this year will be a year of investigating ways to deal with that, because sometimes it's that breath work, sometimes it's plant medicine. Sometimes it's just watching a movie. Sometimes it's just sitting with your thoughts. Sometimes it's just going to be random. But I definitely don't think I'm in that stage where there's that 10, 15, 20
tends to be, I think it tends to be harder for men. I think men suppress it more. I mean, there's a great song called Cry Me a River. I think sometimes we need to do that, but for various reasons we don't. And where, that's how innate that is as between men and women, I don't know, but certainly suppressed grief seems to be more of an issue for men than it does for women, which I think is quite interesting. I had a chat with a friend of mine called Tony, who listens to the show, really good friend of mine. And we were chatting when he lost his dad several years ago now, but he was saying that, similar to you, shot, processed, everything was fine. He had a girlfriend at the time. We're going back a few, I think it must be over a decade ago, but whatever. He said, did everything. And then on Christmas Day, she gave him a locket, or a thing that opened up and it was a picture of him and his dad. And he said, I literally broke down. I was in that room. I was probably crying, he said, for 6 or 7 hours. I didn't leave the room. Wow. It was Christmas Day. I didn't come down. And I just all hit me. I wasn't expecting it. I just opened this one picture, saw it, and he said that was about 6 months after he'd lost his dad. And before that, he thought he was handling it really well, and suddenly, bang, it hit him.
No, I think that's going to happen to me. I mean, I had a moment like that on Christmas Day when I was, I'm going to well up now as well, but so I was opening the presents, and the presents that my mum and dad had given me, and you open up the card, and it's like, love mum and dad, and I'm like, yeah. And even like, there's so many things that happen. Like, so like on Christmas Eve, we were in Brighton and we were having pasta with sauce, and it was the sauce that he had spent all day the day before cooking, like special tomato sauce that takes ages. And it's those things, like, so I can fully accept that there will be, I mean, even today when I got the cards delivered and you're seeing the picture and I'm lighting the candle for him, and it's all those things. That's why I say, like, I think there'll be times in the months and years to come, like, when I hopefully maybe get married, right? There's going to be, like when I have my first child, maybe, right? Especially if I have a son or something like that. That's all going to hit. It's all going to be hitting in there. I don't think it'll ever stop. But yeah. So I think everyone processes it differently and different rates and different ways. I hope that I do process it because I don't want to suppress it. Like I think like my mum did a little bit with my gran, and I think that led to her. She was physically ill every night.
I can believe it. I mean, it's gonna hold a great weight and toll on the body if you do suppress it. I mean, look, to quote one of your favorite authors, one of your favorite books, for you, Harry, Frankl said that there is no need for man to be ashamed of tears, for tears bore witness that a man had the greatest of courage, the courage to suffer. I think it's a problem. I think it's more talked about these days in terms of vulnerability and it being okay for men to cry, and actually crying shows strength and not weakness, and we don't need to suppress it for anybody. Let it out, or letting go, as the book is called, Pathway to Surrender. I think surrender to it, but I know that's easy for me to say at this side of the court, the conversation.
I mean, no, but it's all valuable stuff, and sometimes even in the moment, being able to step back and, like we talk about, everything's about awareness, and step back and almost see the situation from a bird's eye view, and it helps you process a little bit more because you can see the whole picture to a greater degree than when sometimes you're in it. And so sometimes you need another person to be able to reflect that. Sometimes you've got the cognitive ability to be able to do that. And so, like I say, I think right now, because it's still only 2.5 weeks old, I strongly suspect I'm in the shock stage, because I know there's shock and there's denial and there's bargaining and there's anger. Those stages, if I experience them, are probably still to come, and then at some point there'll be acceptance. But I don't think, I think I'm right at the beginning.
Well, I'll read a little bit more from the book for anyone else that, surely there's other listeners that are probably going through other kinds of trauma or still dealing with grief. But it says here, in facing grief, we often have to acknowledge and let go of our shame and embarrassment about having the feeling in the first place. For men, this is especially so. We have to relinquish our fear of the feeling and our fear of being swamped and overwhelmed by it. Helps us to realize that letting go of the resistance to the feeling moves us quickly through it. And slightly earlier in that, we were talking about it earlier, it says, most of us carry a great deal of suppressed grief. men especially are prone to hide that particular feeling, as it is considered unmanly and unmasculine to cry. Most people are afraid of the amount of grief they have suppressed. They are terrified they'll be swamped and overwhelmed if they let it out. People will say, if I were ever to start crying, I may never stop. There is so much grief in the world, grief in my life, grief in my family, grief in my friends, over the untold tragedies of life, all of the disappointments and smashed hopes. However, suppressed grief is responsible for many psychosomatic conditions and health-related complaints, and we need to let it go. I mean, look, again, very easy for me to say on the side of the conversation, and I'll ask you to quote some of this back to me when I need it, I'm sure. But I'm absolutely devastated for you, and to get that news on Christmas Eve.
No, that means there'll be tears every Christmas, that's for sure, going forward. Yeah.
But tears of celebration as well, right? To celebrate an amazing life, an amazing dad, an amazing person, an amazing cook.
He touched a lot of people, like his warmth, his generosity, like it's about as good as you can get, right? It's about as good as you can get, I think. And so, like I say, look, you can always find a positive, right? You can dwell in the negatives and yes, he's not there and my mum's alone and all this. Or you can say, look, how many people can say they had 52 years together, happy marriage? How many people can say they traveled the world together? They had 3 children who close family who are always supportive of each other and 5 beautiful grandchildren. Yeah, not many people can do all that and say all that and so there's so many positives, and I think it doesn't mean that you deny the negatives or you bury your head in the sand. It's just you try and look at everything. And then you allow those 10-20 minutes of massive grief to come through when they come through. It's a bit like when I did a video about worry time, where I was like, I'm not saying don't worry, but just allocate 10 minutes to all of your worrying, and then rather than have like a second here and then a second later and a second there. And I guess that's what David Hawkins is saying with the grief, which obviously is more unexpected. You can't control that so much. But I like that idea, and hopefully that will process in the months and years to come, and I'll be continuing to do the practices that work as well in my life, which hopefully will facilitate that and help with that journey as well.
I think maybe a nice way to finish is actually a book I got for Christmas from my dad called The Proud Highway by Hunter S. Thompson. And in there there is a quote. And I think it's a nice way to think back when that time comes for me to reflect on when anyone close to me goes, and hopefully that helps you as well. But it says here, life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, wow, what a ride.
Absolutely. I do like a bit of Hunter S. Thompson. So, absolutely appropriate. And yeah. And by the way, actually, I did buy a couple of copies of that book that you suggested last time, The Fox, the Mole, and the thing.
Have you seen it now? What wonderful book.
Different versions. I bought the one, 2 versions of the same, which were probably the ones you were talking about, but it's the illustration of, did they make a cartoon of it? Or did
they made a cartoon that's been released as well. But the one I was referring to was a beautifully artistically drawn out book.
So I probably, because I bought both the same, so I bought one for each niece, the 9-year-old nieces. So I don't know if they've read it yet. But one thing I did do as well is I bought, and you might want to consider this as well for Eva and maybe even Leo in a couple of years. But I bought the How to Win Friends and Influence People for Teenage Girls or something for my 11-year-old niece. But what I suggested to her, and I still need to give her, is, and I remember hearing a podcast once where there was this 16-year-old millionaire or whatever, and he was like, oh, what happened is that my parents and uncles, whatever, they would give me books to read and they would pay me like $5 every time I read the book and talked about it or whatever. And he didn't obviously earn the money to be a millionaire from that, but he said he applied what he was learning in the books to do that. And so what I've done is I've created like a template for my niece of like what the book was about, and then a KISS formula for what they're going to keep doing, what they're going to improve doing, what are they going to stop doing, what they're going to start doing based on what they've read. And I've said to her, if she fills that in and then also delivers a 1 to 5 minute verbal presentation to me or other adults, then I'll give her £5, £10 or something like that.
Love that. Oh, great idea. I might find that as well. Brilliant.
Yeah, I think I'll send you the template that I've created. I've yet to print it off and give it to her because my printer doesn't work. But because she's now 11, and I think when you get 11, 12, 13, I know they have a lot of work and schoolwork and stresses because I teach teenagers, but I think it would be good as an incentive to earn extra pocket money.
Yeah, for sure.
So it teaches them that skill of public speaking, but also to really read the book with attention of what they're going to take away from it.
Love that. A great idea. Yeah, send me a template. I'll use that with my own kids for sure. Yeah. Well, look, buddy, thank you for having the strength to come and join me on the show today and have a little chat. I know we talked privately already, but it's a different thing to bring it into the public domain, right? So I'm sure everyone listening to this is sending you their best wishes, their condolences, their love, their support. Certainly we are here at the Day family, and all of that to your mum, to your sister, to you, to everyone that was touched by your dad in that positive way. Obviously, I'm going to be planning now to hopefully deliver this poem tomorrow in a way that doesn't mean I break down in front of everybody. I've heard a technique, none of it's true, that if you hold your ear, it stops the tears from flowing. So maybe I'll just do that while I'm telling. I don't know if it works.
Remember that next Thursday. Okay.
Yeah, I might be squeezing it tightly tomorrow, but hopefully we'll be there tomorrow celebrating 50 wonderful years for my parents. And look, I hope everything continues to go as well as it possibly can in what was a very difficult moment. And I'm always here for you to chat to well at any time, irrespective of when we're recording. And I look forward to catching up with you again in a couple of weeks.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate all our listeners as well for tuning into this episode and following along our journey as well.
And if anyone is interested in finding out more about some of the things that we do, obviously Harry is a health and wellness expert. Do reach out. Our email is in the show notes. If you're interested in executive coaching support or just wanted to reach out with some comments, feedback, anything like that, do reach out to either of us. I'll put both emails in the show notes. We're very keen to hear feedback. Many of you do already, which is wonderful. We've got a listener that manages our Instagram channel and listeners that have bought Harry's book and other things. But please do reach out. And if you want to offer your support or condolences to Harry, then I'm sure he'd love to add those comments to the book he's putting together. So Harry, thank you. Sending you all my love, my best wishes, buddy. And I look forward to catching up soon.
Thank you, Nick. And bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to the Mindful Path podcast with Nick Day and Harry Kalimnios.
We hope you found our discussions insightful and hopefully you've gained some valuable takeaways to support you on your own journey.
Please leave us a review on your preferred podcast platform and share an episode that resonates with you with a friend or family member who may also find it valuable.
Please also don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to ensure you never miss a future episode. And in the meantime, we'll continue exploring mindful path topics to provide you with more insights and more ideas to support you on your personal growth journey.
Thank you for your support and look out for the next episode of the Mindful Path podcast dropping soon.